And also Mr. Ahmad Sazali, LCMA. Uh, he will have to go as well. Yeah, I mean. You should go to US, okay? New York Law School. Yeah, I will give you the recommendation. And also students, ladies and gentlemen. So today will be the last day of our hybrid teaching collaboration program. And still we are delighting to discuss about the interdisciplinary approach in contemporary Islamic law. So today we will have two speakers. They will talk about how the Islamic law application or reception in the U.S. legal domestic policies. So Christopher will talk about that. And Mr. Agustrianta will talk about the development of the Islamic economic law in Indonesia, because this become the common feathers of Indonesian economic society. So without further ado, because we almost delay our event, so I would like to ask Ibu Moderator today, Miss Rohama, Siti Rohama Mardatila. Actually, I can say that she's coming from Netherlands. Yeah, officially. Yeah, officially, formally. Yeah, but not physically. So, thank you very much for everybody for coming. I think we do not. It is not a matter if the students still have like 10 or 15, because we are focusing on the topic. But I think more and more students will coming, because this is we will see about their interaction, their interests, and so on. So thank you very much and good morning. And I would like to give the floors to our moderator today. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you, Pak Dodi. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Okay. The Honorable, the Head of Undergraduate Study Program, Mr. Dodi Setiawan SH, MHLM PhD, and the Honorable Bapak Dr. Andes Agustrianta SHM, SHMHMA PhD, the Dean of the Vice Deans of the Religion, Students, and Cooperation Affairs. And for the academic member, here's also Pak Ahmad Sazali LC, MH, and also the students, undergraduates, and also international program. Very well welcome, and thank you for your coming. And today we are going to still continue our program. It's about the interdisciplinary approach in contemporary Islamic law. And this is the program of International Hybrid Teaching Collaboration Program. And today we are going to talk about and discuss regarding the very interesting topic about the Islamic law in the US legal domestic policy. And also we would like to learn about the development of Islamic economic law in Indonesia. That we have the very distinguished speakers today, Mr. Kesan, Christopher Kesan, GDLLM. Good morning. Thank you for coming. And also our second speaker, Bapak Dr. Andes Agustrianta. Thank you for coming, Pak, and good morning. Okay, without going further ado, I would like to offer my mic and also the time to our first speaker, which is our Bapak Christopher Kesan. But before we get into the main session, I would like to inform you that we will have the Q&A sessions after the presentations from both speakers. And so for those of you who want to ask or who have the questions, please do not hesitate to raise your hand, and also deliver your question directly to the speakers. And I would like to introduce you before your presentation, Mr. Kesan. And Bapak Christopher Kesan is a senior lecturer at this Faculty of Law in the Department of International Law since 2011. Is this correct? Okay, because I just put the information from faculty website. And he obtained Bachelor of Art degree from the Washington State University in the USA, and Doctor of Jurisprudence from the Seattle University School of Law, and also the LLM degree in International Dispute Resolution from the University of Miami School of Law. Okay, I give you the time and also the stage for you.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Would you mind just loading up the PowerPoint? Thank you, Mbak Siti. Thank you, Pak Dodi, for introducing us as well. And thank you to my esteemed colleague, Pak Agus, who I've spoken with even before this session about how much I've learned about Islamic law. So today, in my presentation, I'm going to be focusing on general application of Islamic law in the United States. Unlike my esteemed colleague, Pak Agus, who will be focusing on economic aspects of Islamic law, I'm just going to give a short summary of how Islamic law and religious law as a whole is dealt with in the United States. And by the way, we do have Islam in America, contrary to movies you've seen, etc. This picture is actually a new mosque that was recently constructed in my hometown of Seattle. Plus, it's a great picture, so I had to post that as well. This is in Seattle. Since I've moved away, it was just completed last year. So yes, it's quite large and very ornate, and unfortunately, what you don't see, and I'll point this out, and we'll come back to this. There are no speakers. There is no call to prayer announced from this mosque, however. And so we'll examine that freedom of religion, yet limitations on that freedom of religion. Okay. So as an overview, we'll talk about what principles of American law allow for religious and specifically Islamic law. Then we'll look at the legal framework for how Islamic law is recognized. And then, of course, we'll talk about the limitations on that. And sometimes the exception outweighs the rule. And then there's some things I'd like you to consider, and we'll conclude. And of course, I look forward to your questions at the end. So in any good presentation, I hope to speak very little, and I hope for many questions at the end. So essentially, the philosophy on recognition of religious law goes down to the establishment of America as a secular state. And so we have basically freedom of contract. And we'll come back in more detail about this. And as I was discussing with Mbak Siti before this, how can Islamic law work in a secular state? Can I still be Muslim? Can I still practice Islam while living in America? And the answer is yes, but not necessarily the same way it's practiced here, at least when it comes to how Islamic law is both dealt with and enforced. So especially in dealing with freedom of contract, okay, the ability to create any type of relationship you wish to have. We have religious exemptions in employment. So where our laws, there's exceptions for people whose practice of their faith specifically Islam, doesn't fall into our specific laws. And we do recognize international law, and we do recognize foreign law. And it's mostly on agreement of the parties who are involved. And then, of course, well, move on to this. We'll start with our Constitution. And unlike other constitutions, the American Constitution remains just as it was originally, and then we've amended it 24 times. But today we're only concerned with the First Amendment to the Constitution, which basically reads, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. Meaning, there will be no official state religion. Okay, the state cannot promote religion, cannot make a law requiring religion, and it cannot prohibit individuals from practicing their religions. And so just as the Constitution of Indonesia is the umbrella under which all of their laws are made, same in the United States. So all of the laws and all of the case law must comply with this First Amendment to the Constitution. So we'll call it our freedom of religion clause, essentially is how we sometimes summarize it. And just as a side note, this is the rest of the First Amendment. Freedom of speech, freedom of the press, right of assembly, and right to petition the government for grievances. I think when they wrote the First Amendment, they didn't realize there was going to be 24 more. So they put a lot into the First Amendment. And they couldn't wait to get to the Second Amendment, which was all about guns. So there's a lot in our First Amendment. But it basically underlies the philosophy of how you can be a Muslim, or how you can be a Christian, how you can be Jewish, how you can be a Buddhist, how you can have no religion at all, how that functions in the United States. So, again, I'm just going to give a survey of different areas of law and the how religious law, how people are free to practice religious law, and then we'll come back and look at some limitations on that law. So, Islamic contracts. So, it all comes down to freedom of contract. And so, just as parties can put in any terms that they would like, they can put in terms that comply with Islamic law. Okay. Sharia loans. So if you want to buy a house and you want to comply with Sharia law, it's possible. Dispute resolution. In your contract, just as many of my students who I'm looking at understand choice of law and choice of forum, one of those forum can be an Islamic alternative dispute resolution. Secular courts can apply Islamic law. And there can even be resort to Islamic, specifically remedies for breach of contract that come from Islamic law. Now again, this is not required, but if both parties agree, our secular courts will enforce the religious mandates that the parties agree to. So, a big part of Islamic law is family law. Okay, and this gets a little more complicated. Last 3 weeks ago, I did a whole presentation just on Islamic family law in the United States. But again, we have a different view of marriage in the United States as a change in your legal status. Basically a contract between two people. When you get married, the people I've listed above, an imam, a priest, a rabbi, a minister, a judge, can be licensed to marry people. Meaning when you're married, you can have a religious marriage, and the marriage is governed by your religious laws. And that marriage is also recognized by the state automatically. Okay, you have to get a license, and there's some procedures, etc. There's restrictions, right? As I understand it, in Islamic law, Muslims are not allowed to marry outside of their faith under Islamic law. And so in the United States, a couple who wants to follow Islamic law will follow that. And the Islam will not recognize your marriage if you violate that law. That's the same with Catholic. You cannot get married in the Catholic Church if you're not Catholic. You can't get married if you've been divorced in the Catholic Church. However, the secular law, you can still get married by a judge regardless of whatever religion you profess to be. On the other end, as we call marriage is the contract, divorce is the termination of that contract. I know, sounds very romantic, right? I take you, person I love, to enter into this contract. Yes, it's not very romantic, and of course divorce is even less romantic. But divorce is done in a secular manner. So while there are steps leading up to filing a divorce in the United States, for example, in Islamic law, where you must consult with your imam, and there's, depending on your interpretation, which party can initiate a divorce, the process of having a divorce goes through our secular courts. And we'll come back to that, especially when it deals with children. By the way, this is an interesting map I found. This is the concentration of mosques in the United States. And I was very surprised to see some of them in what I would say some of our most conservative areas of the country also have a huge number of mosques. And there are some communities that are predominantly Islamic in America. And we've had some conflicts on how those rules have applied. But essentially, just like any other contract, prenuptial, postnuptial agreements, how property is distributed upon divorce can also be agreed upon by the parties to follow Islamic law. So there's a huge amount of freedom to follow, essentially having the same effect as an Islamic marriage and an Islamic divorce that would happen in Indonesia can happen the same way upon agreement of the parties in the United States. And by the way, you're already thinking, he keeps saying upon agreement of the parties. And we'll come back to that because that's a huge limitation in the United States. And a major limitation on the practice of Islamic law. Estate law, inheritance law, however, we call it estate law, trusts and estates. That's our law school class in dealing with how property is passed down from one generation to another. Somebody with property who dies can make a will that does comply with Islamic law. Again, traditional Islamic law is 2/3 to the male child, 1/3 to the female child. And that has been specifically ruled by the courts to not discriminate against women, for example. So there is a huge recognition of this ability to follow Islamic law through freedom. And there have also been some accommodations for prayer times. Normally when you work at a job, you get certain breaks during the day. They've specifically required accommodations for prayer times. Religious holidays that are not necessarily Tanggal Merah in the United States have been accommodated. Dietary restrictions, accommodations for religious appearance. Most courts in the United States, there's a law in procedure making anything you wear on your head not acceptable in court. For men, any type of hat, and for women, the hijab, but the court has specifically accepted that and allowed women to wear hijabs in court, whereas other women who are not exercising their religious freedom would not be allowed to wear anything on their heads. So there's a huge exception for this, and of course we'll come back and talk about the limitations. But dietary restrictions, even if you go to jail and you're Muslim, our jails are required to provide you halal food, for example, as a reasonable accommodation. Despite the negative things you've heard about the United States and the exercise of being a Muslim in the United States, legally, there's a huge amount of freedom that enables people to exercise their right and their ability, legally and mostly practically, to be a Muslim in the United States. So, I guess I should ask if you wanted the good news or the bad news first. I gave the good news first, and now the bad news are restrictions or limitations on Islamic law. One thing, just as basically the law says, and Murray v. Geithner is one of the big cases that dealt with Islamic contracts, is that we treat Islamic contracts just as we treat any other contracts. So remedies are limited to money damages or specific performance, which is requiring somebody to fulfill their contractual obligations. Some Islamic remedies under contract law are not allowed simply because they're illegal under public policy. Secular judges, and I mentioned this at the beginning, we're not allowed to compel judges to interpret Islamic law. However, in this case and in other cases, they've looked at what judges have determined the intent of the parties based on them being Islam. Okay, what is your intent? And I can determine your intent, what you thought the contract was, based on the fact that you're Muslim. And so, without interpreting directly Islamic law, judges do attempt to use Islamic law to understand the intent of the parties. So that's just a limitation on basic contract law. Marriage law, the biggest limitation is on custody of the child. Okay? In America, the parents cannot decide on their own who gets custody of the child. Okay, the court acts what we call in loco parentis, acts as what happens in the best interest of the child. So despite any religious beliefs or even a written signed contract between the marital parties, the judge can overrule that in the best interest of the child. Okay, so a male child automatically going to the father or the father's family is not honored in the United States if it's not in the best interest of the child. Of course, there are limitations on recognition of foreign religious marriages, often arranged marriages, for example, in countries where they happen, marriages where child marriage are not recognized, even though they may comply with religious beliefs. Polygamy is not recognized. And this was an interesting case on what we call marital rape. This case, and you can see that they've taken the real names away in the case, as they do in apparently New Jersey. This was a case where a wife accused her husband of raping her. They were married in Morocco, both Muslim, and the husband argued that under my religion, the wife is my property. The wife is all mine. And so it's impossible to rape your wife under his religious law. And actually the judge at the trial level agreed with him and said, I can't put my place in, I don't want to overstep religious law. However, the appeals court decided that it violated domestic law. And so this is, again, a limitation. Parties can agree to comply with their religious law, specifically Islamic law, until it violates human rights laws, basic human decency, etc. In a state law, there's really no limitation. We say a testator's wishes. A testator is the person who makes the will. That testator can bequeath their property to anyone they would like. There's even a famous case about a crazy lady in New York who was a billionaire, and she left all of her money to her dog. And it's legal because the testator's wishes are almost always honored unless they're truly crazy, unless they're truly incapable of making rational decisions. The only case where this may differ from Islamic law is intestacy, meaning you die without a written will. You die intestate. And this will follow state law and not Islamic law. It's a formula, and it just, this property goes to this person, this property goes to this person. But again, if you make a will, you can follow Islamic law or you can follow any law you want. There are some limitations on these religious exemptions. Undue burden. Okay, if it's a security guard who leaves and prays and leaves the bank vault open, it can cause a problem. So there are some limitations on private parties where religious exercises infringe on others, which comes back to the loudspeakers coming from the mosque. Okay, those are limited by our noise laws. And there's also limitations on local governments imposing Islamic law. There's some cities where they've tried to pass local laws saying alcohol is not allowed, pork is not allowed to be sold in stores, and there's some limitations on that as well. And then, of course, this picture, safety and security. There's been a huge number of cases about women and what they can wear to have their ID card, their KTP, and their SIM, their driver's license taken. And, you know, this is the extreme Taliban example, but clearly these women cannot be identified by showing their license without, if their license picture did not clearly show their features on their face. So there are some limitations, mostly practical, however. Okay, not infringing on religion, but the practical consequences of how people live together day to day. However, the most limiting factor is it's not mandatory. Okay? If you live in Indonesia and you're married to a Muslim, you're Muslim and you're married to another Muslim, do you have a choice of which court you can go to? Marriage is dissolved in an Islamic court in Indonesia. You have no choice, right? In America, even if you're Muslim, you can choose not to be governed by Islamic law. And so all of this freedom of contract is based on both parties agreeing to be governed by Islamic law. And without that agreement, you cannot impose Islamic law on another party, even though they are Muslim. Marriage, estate law, dispute resolution. A husband and wife can agree to dissolve their marriage through Islamic means, but a wife or a husband, for example, does not need to follow that, even though they are Muslim. So that's probably the biggest limitation on freedom of contract, is you also have freedom not to be Muslim or not to follow Islamic law, even as a Muslim. What did I do? Okay. And then there are some practical, we've all heard the term Islamophobia. And so even though there's a legal basis for this, there's a view, and while it hasn't been legally supported and it has been legally shut down, there's a view, especially among legislators and people making the laws, that Islam is different, that it's not just a religion, okay, that it has political implications. Again, there was a law in Oklahoma where they said that religion cannot be used as a basis for qualification for running for public office. However, they specifically mentioned Islam, and it was struck down by the Supreme Court. And there's also this fear of what's been called creeping Sharia. The more Islamic law is recognized, someday, the slippery slope argument, we will all be Muslim if we let this rule pass. And we all know slippery slope arguments are a logical fallacy. So there's some practical or cultural limitations as well. And then there's also the question is it truly Sharia? Okay? If I take out a loan to buy a house from a secular bank, even though it checks the boxes and doesn't require interest payments, etc., is it truly Sharia if it doesn't come from a Sharia bank? Is it truly halal if it's not certified by a body similar to the MUE? Okay? So is it truly Muslim, or is it just a workaround, a practical way to exercise Islam without truly being Sharia or truly being Muslim? And of course, there's a question mark because I cannot answer that question, and I don't think it has been answered. I don't think it has been addressed. Whether you can truly have an Islamic divorce in the United States if the process goes through a secular judge. So that's it for today. Again, my conclusion is that there is free recognition as long as it doesn't conflict with others' rights. And I also ask you, on the flip side, as a Muslim in Indonesia, how are other laws of other minority religions in Indonesia addressed? We were just talking before this class about I think all of you should be required to live in a country, maybe 1 year, live in a country where Islam is the minority. And I think every American Christian should be required to live in a Muslim majority country just to understand what it's like to be a minority. And I think doing that would change your perspective and change the perspective of society. So I'll hold off on questions, and I look forward to your questions about this and how things work in America. I appreciate your time. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you so much, Bapak Christopher. This very interesting presentation, and this is how the Islamic law apply in the United States legal system. And of course, there are main difference between the Islamic law in the US and Indonesia. The biggest difference is about that Islamic law in Indonesia is mandatory for all of those who are Muslim, because we are Muslim, we have no choice when it comes to the inheritance in marriage, so we automatically have to obey with the Islamic law. But in the United States, even though you are a Muslim and Islamic law is available there, but there is not mandatory for you to comply or to obey with the Islamic and practice with Islamic law in your private matters. And there are also some limitations in the United States regarding the implementation of Islamic law, as long as it is not conflicting with the rights of others, so you can choose the Islamic law. And this is very interesting when we talk about the marriage, because marriage is highly correlated with some people's religions, that in the United States, child marriage is not recognized, even though it is recognized by Islamic law, and polygamy is not recognized at all, and also marital rape, it is also prohibited, and it can be considered as a criminal. Okay, and I hope it's also happened in Indonesia. And this is a very interesting question from Pak Christopher that maybe will be answered by Pak Agus regarding the Islamophobia, and it is Islam is different or keeping Sharia, or truly Sharia when we talk about the banking system, and how about when we talk about the religious law, it is not only the majority that we have to consider, but also how about the minority religious. Then they also have their own religious law, and how we are in Indonesia, as a Muslim, and it is obvious for us that there is Islamic law exists. But how about the other religious law? It is also, I don't know, maybe Pak Agus will talk more about this, and I'll give you, Pak Agus, for the time and a stage for you.
Okay, everybody. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Peace be on you all the time. Alhamdulillah wa syukrulillah. Assalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. Our colleague Pak Christopher, and also Mbak Rohama, Mas Sadali, and also dear my students and all the audience for this teaching collaboration program 2022. Okay, the topic that I would like to present here is on Islamic economic, but more emphasize on Islamic banking in Indonesia. Because what I came in my mind is actually the emphasis is on Islamic banking, but the title there was written that Islamic economics, so therefore I try to bridge. Okay, so I think all the audience here, my students, I think it is quite familiar for you about Islamic
economic and Islamic banking, but let's go for the little bit detail and also with some international comparison on the matter of Islamic banking. Oke, enggak mau ya. Oh, arahnya sana. Betul ya? Okay, thank you. I would like to start with the global phenomenon on Islamic finance. Okay, as we know that there is what we call by the tremendous development of the industry of Islamic banking and Islamic finance. Islamic banking currently operates in more than 80 countries, not only in Muslim countries, but spread over Europe, America, and Far East. As has been told by Pak Chris before, that in America itself, Islamic banking also getting, getting popular among people, especially after the what we call by the crisis, we call it by subprime market. In the early of Obama period, America was hit by the crisis, financial crisis, which is actually very serious for American and Europe. But for Indonesian, it was not quite serious because we know that only few Indonesian involved in the investment in US dollar, for example. So no less than 80 countries in the world. And today, Islamic finance is estimated to manage fund for about 3 trillion US dollar in 2022. Worldwide or globally. And then Islamic banking contribution in this whole of Islamic economic or Islamic finance is 68.7 according to Islamic Financial Service Board report 2022. Okay, we go to the next. So the scope of Islamic economic or halal industry. There is current popular term, we call it by halal industry. So if we mention about halal industry, actually this is similar with Islamic economic, because economic not only talking about finance, but economics including about all the economic activities. So Islamic economy or halal industry is very wide coverage, and part of Islamic economic or halal industry is actually Islamic finance, and part of Islamic finance is Islamic banking. But Islamic banking contributes the highest portion of the total Islamic economy. For clear, I think this is halal industry coverage. Halal industry, or we call in other words by Islamic economy, actually covering not only financial business, but we have here cosmetic and personal care. As we know that South Korea is very important halal industry in terms of cosmetics. I think currently South Korea is the biggest player for halal cosmetic. And then logistic and services, we know that there are many things here, and food and beverage, halal certification on food, only part of the halal industry. Also lifestyle, healthcare services, healthcare services, just like hospital, and hospitality. It is about halal tourism. We go to the next. This is the global development. Number one is Malaysia to develop halal industry or Islamic economic, not only in financial or money, but in all aspects. We know here there is food, fashion, cosmetic, media, tourism. Let's look in Indonesia. No less than 50 hospitals in Indonesia currently applying for halal healthcare services. One of them is JIH Hospital. JIH Hospital and then PKU Muhammadiyah and Rumah Sakit Hidayatullah, all them are certified by Syariah healthcare services. So what is the difference? If you come to JIH, for example, and you come to Panti Rapih, you come to Bethesda, for example, or to Siloam, I think will be different. Because in JIH Hospital, if it is relating with installation of disposal catheter, yeah, for example, for urine or for another thing, it must be helped by same-sex nurses, same-sex staff there. So it cannot, for example, male patients helped by or assisted by female nurse, for example. So it cannot. It is a standard there that it cannot be different sex. It must be with the same sex. Again, the hospital must ascertain or make sure that every drug given to the patient must be halal certified. In case there are some drugs not yet certified, it must be under the patient consent. So the hospital will offer them. We don't have halal certified medicine or drug for this disease. So it is up to you. But this is again, and again, that the food there, the restaurants or the kitchen, must be halal certified also. So this is the difference, and I think it is getting bigger, the size of halal healthcare services, including in tourism, for example. You know that today there are many what we call by Muslim-friendly hotels. Sometimes the people call Sharia, but the most popular term right now is Muslim-friendly hotel. Hotel ramah Muslim. Hotel ramah Muslim, it must be qiblah direction there, must be place for the taking ablution or wudu, and it will never sell drugs, yeah. And in case there is the swimming pool, it must be spirited between male and female. And I think one of the hotel that we know is Davam Hotel, yeah. Davam Hotel in Yogyakarta, I think certified on that matter. So, but we call it by Muslim friendly. I think this is the soft term in order not to exclude any person who do not have the same perception with this matter. But the name is Muslim friendly. And I think the number of the hotels adopting this standard right now is getting more, yeah. Okay, so this is the coverage of halal industry. So we go to Islamic banking in Indonesia. So this is Islamic banking across the jurisdiction, and if we look here, Indonesia is quite low the position, so lower than Iraq, because we only get 6%. The asset of Islamic banking in Indonesia compared to the national asset is only 6 plus certain %. So actually, the size is still small. The highest is Iran and Sudan, because Iran adopting what we call by total conversion. So in Iran, there is no conventional bank there. Similarly in Sudan. But in Saudi Arabia adopting dual banking system, conventional and Islamic all together, run together. So one country, two system. Same with Indonesia and Malaysia. But we look here that other than Middle East countries, or other than Middle East, which is famous with oil, yeah, only Malaysia who can enter into the 6 biggest, Iran, Sudan, Saudi Arabia, Brunei, Kuwait, then Malaysia. So if we look here, Indonesia is lower than Afghanistan and Iraq in terms of the percentage or the share asset compared to the national banking asset. So only 6% in Indonesia. So 94 still what we call still unconventional banks. 94. So only 6%. Of course, this is the question. Because Muslim in Indonesia is actually, Indonesia is the highest populated Muslim population in Indonesia, but in terms of Islamic banking, only 6%. We look here, Malaysia entered the 6th rank here because Malaysia, let me check here, because Malaysia we know 31%, but Indonesia only 6%. Though the number of the population Muslim in Indonesia is much bigger compared to Malaysia. Malaysia only 60% of the total population are Muslim, and Indonesia is 87%. But the asset of Islamic banking only 6%. Okay, we continue to the next. Okay. Oh, this is previous year. Okay. So the biggest player, the biggest player for Islamic banking is actually, if we look here, the first Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia contributes 64%. So this is not strange because Saudi Arabia is the center for Muslim rights. It means that Kaabah is there. Masjidil Haram is there, so it is not strange. Though Saudi Arabia also adopting dual banking system, but so the biggest is Saudi Arabia, second is Malaysia. So it is quite surprise for us because Malaysia is second, 29%. Indonesia was not mentioned here because very small. The contribution of Islamic banking in Indonesia compared to the global Islamic banking. So the three biggest homes for Islamic finance actually Saudi Arabia, Malaysia, and Uni Arab Emirates. So this is the three biggest player for Islamic finance. Maybe you are asked, we are quite curious because if we see in our society there are many Islamic banks, there are many name board. That Islamic bank, Islamic insurance, Islamic mutual fund, Islamic capital market, there are many. But actually, the asset is very small. The asset is very small. Okay. Second, this is the number of Islamic bank according to the publication of OJK, OJK, Otoritas Jasa Keuangan, that there are 13, 13 Islamic commercial bank, and there are 20 in the lower part is actually Syariah unit. Syariah unit is Syariah division. It is conventional bank which open Islamic services. We have Bank Danamon, Bank Permata, Maybank, CIMB, OCBC, including BPD, Daerah Istimewa Yogyakarta, etc. But the one until 13 is actually full-fledged. We call it is fully Islamic bank. Fully Islamic bank. But for the second part is actually conventional bank which open Syariah services. We call it by Syariah unit or Syariah division or Islamic window, or in regulation it is called by UUS, Unit Usaha Syariah. Okay. We go. Syariah Commercial Bank 13, Syariah Division or Syariah Unit 20, and Syariah Rural Banks or BPRS 2002, including Bank Syariah UII NCD Tiro is actually one among 202 rural bank. So or BPD Syariah DIY or BPD Syariah DIY included in 20 Syariah Division because Syariah services within conventional. Okay, we go to the next. Best Islamic bank, of course. So you know why the government, especially Erick Thohir, the Minister of BUMN, the government-owned companies, because Indonesia want to push Bank Syariah Indonesia to enter 10 biggest Islamic bank in the world. Because when it is still Bank Syariah Mandiri, BNI Syariah, and BRI Syariah, it never touch the Big Ten. But the aim or the purpose of Erick Thohir, the Minister Erick Thohir, is actually to push these 3 own bank to merge becoming one in order the asset is biggest in Indonesia, of course, and can enter the top 10 of Islamic bank in the world. So that's why they push this. So this is the development of the market share of Islamic bank. In 2016, still 4.8. In 2019, 5.9. In 2021, 6.5. In 2022, is 6.6. So it is still very low. The development is very slow also. Okay, we go to the next. Current development, the overall is to 726 trillion, and it accounted of 6.6% of the total banking system. Okay, if we see to the historical sketch of Islamic banking in Indonesia, it comes from the very beginning. The history of bank in Indonesia is marked by the establishment of the Javas Bank, established by Dutch colonial in 1827. Yeah. So if you see that Bank Indonesia today, our central bank, was actually the conversion of the Javas Bank established by the Dutch. So the Dutch rather tricky in the transition era. You know what we call by KMP, Round Table Conference. So Round Table Agreement. KMP, Konferensi Meja Bundar, but actually not conference, it's agreement, yeah, agreement. Konferensi Meja Bundar was actually a little bit tricky. That Indonesia, when Indonesia got its independence, our central bank is actually BNI, Bank Negara Indonesia, is our central bank. Just like Malaysia, BNM, Bank Negara Malaysia. But because of KMP, then the Dutch forced Indonesia to terminate the function of central bank of BNI to be switched to the Javas Bank. So Dutch forced Indonesia to purchase the Javas Bank, belong to Netherlands. Then Indonesia purchased this and make the Javas Bank as the central bank, and BNI, which actually served as central bank, converted to be commercial bank. So this is the history of the Indonesian banking system. And then in 1992, first Islamic bank established in Indonesia, it is Bank Muamalat. And then in 1998, because of economic crisis, it gave the impetus for the rest of Islamic bank. Islamic bank was proven to be the most prudent bank amid the collapse of most banking companies during financial crisis. So we can see the report of Bank Indonesia, that Bank Muamalat was the most prudent bank at the time, because almost all the bank playing in the currency speculation with the US dollar. Because at that time, Pak Chris, if you bring dollar at that time, suddenly you will be very rich here. Because when US dollar, before the crisis, only 2,500. I still remember. I was a new lecturer at that time, and UII was very keen, very easy to send the lecturer go abroad. Because when US dollar only equal to 2,500. But when the crisis hit Indonesia, when US dollar becoming 16,000, it is not only increase, it is jump or rocketed. Not only increase, but it rocketed. So almost all bank companies collapse. including BCA, also brought to BBPN. BBPN is Badan Penyihatan Perbankan Nasional, national body to what we call to recover bank. And there was no Bank Mandiri at the time, because Bank Mandiri is actually a merged company from many bank belong to the government, so becoming Bank Mandiri. So there was BDNI, etc. So when US dollar equal to around 16,000, so you can imagine that the crisis was very serious, and Bank Muamalat was reported by Bank Indonesia as the most prudent bank at the time. Because of this, then government take more serious to help the development of Islamic bank. I think the policy of the government was very clear, because then the government amended the act in 1998 on banking was amended, and the amendment gave the possibility for conversion from conventional to Islamic bank, as well as to give conventional bank opportunity to open Sharia services within the conventional bank. So this is because of the crisis. Before crisis, the government just ignore Islamic bank. Just let it open, but then the government just keep silent. Up to you. You will go up or die. But then, because of crisis, so I think, come back to the statement of Albert Einstein. Yeah, Albert Einstein was reported to say, in the midst of every crisis lies great opportunities. So something to becoming big, we need crisis. Pak Jokowi will never be a president if we don't have the political crisis at that time, which give the opportunity for Pak SBY, and then Pak Jokowi becoming president. The president always coming from the elite, yeah, elite Indonesia. So because of the crisis, then everything. No, there are 13 full-fledged Islamic bank. Okay, so this is the legal policy during the journey of Islamic bank. So the first Islamic bank was established in 1992. Then, because of crisis, then Act number 10 on 1998, conversion and Syariah window is possible, yeah. So just imagine from 92 until 98, the government doesn't give any incentive for Islamic bank, yeah. But after the crisis, then government realizing that Islamic bank can do something, yeah. And then in 1998, it is established National Sharia Council with the duty to give the fatwa on Islamic financial matters in Islamic economy, Islamic transactions by Dewan Syariah Nasional. In 2006, the Act number 3 on 2006 for the Peradilan Agama, ya Islamic Code, that the first statement given by regulation about the place or the forum to settle the dispute. So in 2006, then it was becoming clear that if there is the dispute in Islamic transaction, then it must be brought to Islamic court in 2006. So Islamic Bank must wait for 1992 until 2006. 14 years without any statement from the government to which court Islamic banking dispute settlement should be brought. So the government just ignored. Then 2006 started to do that, and in 2008 then the specific act on Islamic bank was issued, and also about sukuk, yeah. And then in 2009 tax incentive for Islamic banking transaction was given, and in 2015, I think it is important, though this is only issued in Aceh, Kanon Aceh, number 9 of 2014, because on Syariat Islam give the possibility for Aceh to enforce another Kanon, which obliged Aceh to only permit Islamic bank operating in Aceh. So in Aceh currently, there is no conventional bank operating there because of Aceh Konon. So all conventional bank move out, or they give the asset to the what to call their brother company. Yeah. For example, in CAMB was not possible to operate in Aceh, but CAMB Syariah can operate there. So only Islamic transaction allowed to operate in Aceh, started from 2020, and in July 2017, the government established what we call by Komite Nasional Ekonomi Syariah, National Committee for Syariah Economic, CNEX, Komite Nasional Ekonomi and Keuangan Syariah, was established by the government. It is because of this, then Indonesia was put in the first rank of the Islamic economic indicators, because it shows, or it demonstrates about the seriousness of the government to actually to develop Islamic bank, Islamic economic, I mean. So those are the regulation, and this is the legal framework what actually the act on Islamic bank govern. So this are the area under the governance of Islamic Bank Act, and also the first the Act number 7 on 92, the first act which permit the establishment of Islamic bank. Okay, so this is again Indonesia respond. So actually the policy of the government really affect to the development of Islamic bank. In 1992, the amendment of Islamic bank make the possibility for PMA start to operation, etc. Okay. So this is a legal problem that we have, the disharmony between Islamic contract and civil contract, as been mentioned by Pak Chris before, that this has also happened in America, that previously I discussed with Pak Christopher, because Islamic banking cannot be established in America, because according to the National Bank Act, 1864, ya, 1864 if I'm not mistaken, ya, Undang-Undang Bank Amerika itu 1864. As the National Bank Act 1864 in America is stated that bank cannot do any sale or lease, ya, tidak boleh jual beli atau menyewakan. But Islamic bank is actually deal with such kind of sale and lease. Of course, Islamic bank cannot be established in America until OCC, it is OJK belong to American state government, ya. OJK of America then issue interpretative letter to exclude, to exempt Islamic banking from this rule. Then Islamic banking can operate in America right now. But as what was told by Pak Christopher about Syariah creeping and anti-Syariah, yeah, movement there, and also question about whether this is truly Syariah or just try to go to another route for the same destination. So this is the, I mean, still actual issues to discuss. Yeah, it is just like we are talking about positivism or progressive law. Progressive law, it means just like Madhab Undip, ya. Madhab Undip, just like Pak Rohidin always saying that perbankan Syiah just like like Casper but wearing a new cloth, ya. Kayak katanya tuyul dikuplui, kata Pak Rohidin. But according to positivism, that actually word or statement means something, ya. Okay. Lacking support for the ADR in Islamic finance. So alternative dispute resolution, I think coming from Europe and America, isn't it, Pak Chris? Yeah. The movement for ADR, alternative dispute resolution, was initiated by America and by Europe, especially England, UK, because these two countries are actually very litigious countries, isn't it? That everything they bring to the court. According to the book that I read, yeah, and therefore they need another alternative. Are there any possibility out of the court? And in Indonesia, we have what we call Sharia Arbitration Panel, ya. But it is different from the BANI, Badan Arbitrase Nasional Indonesia, which is full with support. Basarnas is lacking of support. So Pak Bagia and me involving in Basarnas quite a while, and we know that Yogyakarta is the most active professional Basarnas out of Jakarta. So we settle the case from East Java, from Central Java, yeah, but lacking for the support. KNEKS has came to visit us, but not giving something, yeah, just to visit, yeah. We already tell our compliance on that matter in order that Committee Nasional Ekonomi Syariah lacking Islamic finance legal awareness, so lacking of awareness. So though Muslim many in Indonesia, but Islamic bank is small. Muslim number is big, but Islamic bank is small. So this is Indonesian case. Why? Because lacking of the awareness in this matter. So conclusion, Indonesia is one of the most promising countries for the home of Islamic banking business. It's just promising, yeah. But the real is not. Even I read in Jakarta Post the article written by expatriate Pak Chris, and it's saying Indonesia is the sleeping giant in Islamic finance. Giant but sleeping, yeah. The question is, how long the sleeping will continue? Raksasa tidur katanya. Saya membaca, I tell you in bahasa Indonesia, saya membaca artikel ditulis di Jakarta Post, ditulis oleh orang asing, dia mengatakan Indonesia, keuangan syariah di Indonesia itu adalah raksasa tidur, the sleeping giant. Kalau bangun itu besar sekali. Karena Singapura 4 juta orang saja jadi punya rekening bank itu sudah besar. Di sini mau cari 20 juta itu mudah. But we are sleeping, ya. Yeah. So that's the problem, sleeping giant, raksasa tidur, ya. So until when the sleeping still going on, we don't know, ya. Okay, Indonesia is one of the most promising, ya, most promising. And second, regulatory framework in Islamic banking are sufficient. However, they need more harmonization with civil law, especially in the contract. So Islamic contract banyak was brought to the court because to some extent contradicting with the perdata private contract. Just like about jaminan, collateral, fiducia, it is different with the Syariah concept. And the last, legal awareness among people need to be improved gradually. So that's all I think for my presentation on Islamic economy and Islamic banking. So I will return to the moderator, Mbak Titi. Thank you very much for the opportunity. I do apologize for any shortcoming. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you very much, Pak Agus Yanta, for your interesting presentation. And this is very interesting because the Sharia or Islamic industries is becoming a global phenomenon, including the banking industry. Yeah, in Indonesia is one of the promising country for bigger Islamic banking in Indonesia, and I know the reason why there is a holding banking, Islamic banking in Indonesia becoming the Bank Syariah Indonesia (BSI). It is because the government want to become the first or top 10 of the Islamic banking in the world. So this is very interesting, and if I can conclude for myself that Islamic banking in Indonesia is like Islamic law in the US. It is available in the country, but Muslim do not enforce to obey or to have the account in the banking system. Like in the US, Muslim in the US are not enforced to obey to the Islamic law, and this about the choose. About the options. Okay, we go into the Q&A sessions. Any one of you who have questions, you can raise your hand and do not hesitate to ask or to deliver a question, maybe Syabil. And maybe you can also ask in Bahasa Indonesia. I would like to help you to interpret the question for Mr. Christopher. Anyone? Syabil, maybe? You always ask in my class, so you have to ask. Okay, Pak Sazali first. Okay.
Okay, thank you for time. Give it to me. I want to ask to Chris, Pak Chris, about. I was interested about your explanation how the American Constitution protect the practice of a religion there. And yesterday I explained in my material, in my topic, I explained to the participant about this is actually my my research thesis when in magister. I talk about the regulation of religion in constitution. In my thesis, I found that there are two patterns of regulation of religion in constitution. The first pattern is explicit constitutional, and the second one is implicit constitutional. I compared between Egypt Constitution and Indonesian Constitution, Undang-Undang Dasar 1945. So in the pattern of explicit constitutional, I found it in Egypt Constitution, when the Constitution of Egypt mentioned the certain religion in its constitution, namely Islam. Islam is official religion, formal religion of the state, and also Islam is the basis of legislation in Egypt. Yeah. There is certain religion, the name of religion in the constitution. So in the pattern of implicit constitutional, I found it in Indonesian Constitution, Undang-Undang Dasar 1945. When there is Indonesian Constitution doesn't mention any certain religion in our constitution. There is no Islam, the word Christianity, and the other in our constitution. In the Article 29 of the Constitution of Indonesia only mentioned that the state based on one honest God, and the only God, But this article, according to me, is the basis of the production of many laws in Indonesia that related to religion. For example, law of zakat, law of Islamic banking, law of Hajj, pilgrimage, and the other. So I just want to apply my theory that I found in my thesis to American Constitution. Do you agree that I said America also apply or implement implicit constitutional when the Constitution of America also protect Islamic or protect religious practice or religious law, even only optional, optional. When Muslim in America want to practice it, they can, still optional. There is no force, From this point of view, I also assume that actually there is no pure secular state, because when the Constitution protect human right, and one of human rights is about religion, to practice the religion, so there is no pure secular state. Do you agree with that? And okay, yeah, that is the first question. Yeah, and the second one is about I also was interested with the Islamophobia, Islamophobia in America. Maybe you can tell us more explanation or more elaboration about how the news what tell the people of America about Islam. Is there many or any distortion about Islam? Yeah, about Islam in America, until why the people of America still think that Islamic religion, Islamic teaching, it is related to terrorism, for example. Yeah. And the last question is, how do you feel as majority in Indonesia live in Indonesia? How do you feel as a majority? I mean here the majority, minority. Sorry, as minority. I'm sorry, as minority in Indonesia. Maybe, yeah, you come from America, and also your religion also. Yeah, how do you feel live in Indonesia? Yeah, this is very personal question. Maybe can you compare this personal question to you with the life of religion in America? Yeah. Okay, thank you. Maybe too much question. Thank you, Pak Chris. Too long, yeah. Yeah, I just want to open the session. Yeah, maybe the other participant will also give the question. Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Okay, I think I should answer now rather than waiting, because otherwise I will forget. So as to your first question regarding implicit inclusion of religion and the lack of a pure secular state, I agree. Again, it's not, I think it's a sliding scale. It's a spectrum of, and I think your comparison between Egypt, which is a very religious state, and Indonesia less so, and America even less so, and possibly the Netherlands and Germany even more secular than America. And we do include, again, just the mere mention of religion means religion was on the mind of the framers of the Constitution, and the ability to practice that religion. And again, as I mentioned, courts will enforce religious agreements. And so by a court enforcement, we call it color of the state, meaning it's recognition of the state of religions. Our tax code offers tax exemptions for religious organizations. So there is this constant conflict between separating, we say, church and state, religion and government. But it's a constant struggle. And I think even in that not only has our Constitution on that spectrum, but interpretation of that Constitution has moved us in different directions on that spectrum over time, of the way our constitutions, we've become more secular in some ways, but recently we've gone the other way, where religion has become more enforced by the state action and recognized as superior almost to non-discrimination, et cetera, and other basic rights, as you said. So I would agree with your statement, to make a short story long. And so, yeah, absolutely. The second question about Well, Islamophobia. Yeah, I think it does come from the conflagration where a lot of Americans relate Islam and the bad acts of Islamic actors. It also comes from ignorance and what we don't learn anything about Islam. And so ignorance, we say, breeds fear. So ignorance breeds fear. And it's not just, we also see Islam as a foreign religion, okay? And it's not just Islamophobia, it's xenophobia, fear of foreigners. Muslims come from parts of the world that we would already be discriminating against or fearful of. And of course, then the media, as you said, plays into that fear, where the villains in our movies are Muslims. And there have been some bad actors in America who have purported to do that in the name of their bad acts, in the name of Islam. But the more educated you are, the more you realize that it's more geopolitical than religious. And so, you know, the less you know, the more fearful you are. And so I think that's where Islamophobia comes from. You know, before it was Muslim, it was Catholics. Or before it was Islam, it was Jews. The Holocaust was based on the same type of fear and phobia. Before that, even Catholics were discriminated against in America. And so Islam is just the latest in the series of targets towards anybody different from Protestant Christian, our founding, the people who came over on a boat because they were so religious. They had to get out of England. So yes, I think that. And do I feel I should compare. I lived in Korea before I lived in Indonesia. And so I think that's a good comparison. Feeling I'm definitely a minority, ethnically and unfortunately linguistically, as I remain here. All aspects, except religion was such a small part of Korean culture. Whereas I think because Islam is such a part of the culture here, as well as a religion, that you feel more like a minority than you would in a secular state than I did in Korea, basically. Because not only do I look different, but my religion is different. And religion is a much larger, it's hard for me to say since I'm working at an Islamic university and living in Jogja. I definitely, there might be different perspectives from people working in an office in Jakarta. But I definitely feel it more. I don't feel discriminated against. I don't feel like there are restrictions on my practice. But there are definitely restrictions on my behavior based on the interrelationship between Islam and the government here, just as in any society. But I definitely don't feel inhibited my ability to practice my religion as much as I do practice. I'm not a very good Catholic to begin with, so that may also affect my views. And you may find other people who are very deeply Christian who may feel differently than I do, who couldn't work here without a chapel as well as a mushola. But yeah, so that's my personal perspective in that. And of course, I would feel different in Egypt, and I would feel different in Saudi Arabia as well. So again, on that scale, back to the constitutionality. So thank you for the question. I hope I answered it fairly.
Thank you, Pak Chris, for your answer. Hopefully that's addressed all answer for the all question from Pak Sazali. Any other participants, maybe? It's still 5. Oh, Shabil. Okay, good.
Good morning, sir. So I have a question. So what I get from your explanation in short that in America, they ensure that there is a freedom of religion, right? So how does American particularly felt that when a mosque, they they do prayer call 5 times a day? Don't you think that it will be a disturb towards other civilians there? So is it really true that American ensure the legal protections toward the Muslim when they do the prayer call? Or they're gonna told the Muslim to just shut up or something like that? Thank you.
Well, I think you identified the problem. There's a conflict between, again, allowing, how much does allowing your practice of religion infringe on the rights of others? We have a famous line of cases. One of them is before the Supreme Court now, about religious beliefs versus protection from discrimination. The mosque loudspeakers isn't too much of an issue, but it's similar. It does. Some people would see it as infringing on their rights to not be woken up at 3:30 in the morning, or peaceful enjoyment. But I mean, we've had similar cases with church bells. The 10 Commandments in our courthouses. There's been pushback even against Christianity spreading into secular society too much. Keep it in the church, keep it inside. But the biggest conflict now is between, the cases are basically same-sex couples looking to find services. This is a web developer and says, I cannot develop a website for a same-sex couple because of my religious beliefs. And so we have the constitutional mandate to protect all people from discrimination based on anything that makes them a minority, to their ability to practice their religion. And so that's also a sliding scale. For example, we found that it's okay for a religious school, don't get any ideas, for a religious school only to have lecturers or teachers from their religion. Don't fire me. but we found that to be okay, whereas that same religious school could not fire their cleaners, their janitors, for not being of the same religion. So again, it's what is practice of your faith? Is the call to prayer, is that essential for Muslims to practice their beliefs? And it's important, but does that outweigh the importance? So it's a balancing test with anytime we have a conflict among our different rights. Again, did that answer? Okay.
Thank you so much for the answer, Pak Chris. And maybe the other participants, there's still students here. Okay, ito angkat tangannya.
Actually,
Are you up your hand?
I have a question for Park August, though. Well, I touched on Islamic banking in the United States, and what in your understanding of the banking law, besides what about our central bank, the Federal Reserve, sort of controls the economy through regulating interest rates on banks. So how would change in the Banking Act of Civil War, how could Islamic banking be integrated into our Federal Reserve System based on both reserve requirements and the control of the prime interest rate, which is one of our economic monetary policy tools? How does it work with interest without having interest?
Yeah.
I guess I'm curious.
Yeah, that's very, very basic and fundamental questions. Some experts, they are really propagating for the establishment of Islamic Central Bank, actually. This has happened in a country which adopt dual banking system, just like in Malaysia, Indonesia, Brunei. Why? Because they argue that it's kind of a kind of what they call not really true if we integrate to the central bank, but the central bank still decide many things based on interest rate, even global interest rate, just like LIBOR, London interest rate, etc., or maybe in America, yeah, because Central Bank of Indonesia always refer to that. And I think almost all the banks in the world referring to, I think their agreement that maybe Basel Committee or something else, I don't really understand. But the point that they are still refer to the interest rate global. How then Islamic bank can be managed? Because by the end of the journey, then actually it is built on that matter. That's why I said to you before that many scholars advocating for the importance of establishing a different central bank. But it is impossible, of course, because too difficult. And a country which adopt mono banking system, just like Iran, like Sudan, like, if I'm not mistaken, Pakistan, and many other countries, they don't have any problem. Though I believe that they still refer, because they cannot really in this global world we cannot escape from that kind of mechanism. But they try to adjust with the global demand by what we call by certain policy, just like Bank Indonesia, the Central Bank of Indonesia. Of course, every bank they only permitted to operate. Or one of the requirement to establish bank, I think that they must put deposit money in the central bank, and the deposited money is given return by the interest. That's what happened before. But for Islamic bank in Indonesia, the government adopting another policy that every bank Syariah, Islamic bank, which is legalized by the government, they must put money deposited there, but they have different agreement with the bank Syariah. We call it by certificate Wadiah, yeah. Wadiah certificate. Wadiah is just like saving the money with the different calculation with the conventional bank. Conventional bank is by the interest rate, but the Syariah bank by certain criteria which is lower than interest rate actually. So they calculate. I'm not understand precisely about the criteria or indicators to determine how much money as the return given to the respective bank. But the point that they have different agreement in Islamic bank. So this is, I think, is just the way to bridge between this idealist view on Islamic bank with the difficulties in the practical undertakings. So, but your question is actually already becoming many objection of the Muslim scholars that the Islamic bank must have a spirit central bank, but that's not easy, I think. Okay, so to some extent we try to clean up in the bottom, but in the top sometimes it's difficult. But in Islamic legal maxim, there is the statement like this. This is you will say that this is maybe just like apology, but in Islamic legal maxim, Pak Sadali understand. Ma la yudraku kuluhu, la yudraku kuluhu. Ma la yudraku kuluhu, la yudraku. Everything which cannot be achieved totally cannot be ignored totally. Yeah, yeah. So this is legal maxim. To some extent, it seems like apology, but that's the legal maxim. Sometimes the law playing with the legal maxim, which actually it seems to be rationalizing something, but that's the fact. Yeah. Okay. My question, yeah, my question to you. My question, because Pak Sadali also asking about secularism. What I know so far, America is the truly secular state, because in the Declaration of Establishment of America, it was stated more or less, yeah, the United States of America was established regardless of religion, of many things. Yeah, it indicated actually it is different from European country, which actually the king or the queen, just like in England, Queen Elizabeth, or no as Charles Prince, Charles King is actually automatically becoming the advisor of the Roman England Catholic Church. It means that since for the beginning, England is actually not secular, but America, when its establishment clearly declared that. But I am rather surprised because in US dollar there is the statement, in God we trust. In Indonesia, we believe in ketuhanan yang Maha Esa, but in our money there is no something about God. And the people making fraud with money. But in America, how come they saying that no religious inclusion in everything, but suddenly they come with in God we trust. Yeah. Okay.
Well, I think you're right. The history is important, right? So the prohibition on establishing a state church was exactly in response to the Anglican Church of the Church of England. We didn't want a state religion. So I think you're right. The history says that's why we had that free, we call it the Establishment Clause. I mean, we can't. Right. It was part of the list of things. We don't want a king, so that's why we have limits on the presidency. We don't want a state church, and so that's why we have the First Amendment. But with also the other part of the history is that we had religious underpinnings in the founding of the colonies. And so people came here as religious refugees, essentially, at the time. And so there's a huge conflict between establishment and exercise. The freedom to exercise your religion and the freedom from state support for any one particular religion. Now, of course, the money, we have the Supreme Court has the red mass to start our Supreme Court. There's a lot of, I'll call it Judeo-Christian values that have remained historical. And again, there's people who would like to have Christianity as the official religion, just as I'm sure here there's been a push to have Islam as the official state religion. And so, yeah, you can't escape it. And I think some European countries, like again Germany, where, as we found out from our FIBA, that they don't understand even a religious school like we have, and so, yeah, we can't completely escape it. Yeah, the "In God We Trust," of course. Right. Well, definitely hasn't prevented bad acts with the money, as you joked. It won't prevent corruption by putting "In God We Trust" on the money. Well, so, but yeah, there are a lot of things. I mean, our only religious holiday, the only day we get off every year based on religion, is Christmas. All of our other holidays, our Tanggal Merah, are secular holidays. Only Christmas is, especially for religious holiday. Right. Pardon? A banking holiday, yes. Tanggal Merah, we say, yes. Where the banks are closed. Exactly. Yes. Yeah, that's right. We call it. Right. Our banks are closed. No transactions. Government offices are closed. Things here. Right?
So that's the original banking holiday.
Right. That's where that comes from. Yeah.
So, but in Holland, I think European banking holiday.
Oh, Europeans never go to work. Right? They're always on holiday.
But we will have the long summer holiday. Summer holiday.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, thank you.
I think the American is wise because they put the God in the something that prevent people to abuse it, yeah, to fraud with money. So they put the God in the God we trust. But outside of that, yeah, we became a secular. Okay. Thank you. If there is no question, I think we can end up our discussion and our topic today, right now. And thank you so much for the speakers, Pak Agus, thank you so much, Pak Christopher, thank you so much. And for the all participants, for the students, also thank you very much for coming. And I close by saying Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alamin and wassalamu